Due to the popularity of some of their players, it's understandable why Cloud9 is such a loved team in CSGO. And it's true that they actually have always been flirting with potentially becoming an elite team. Now, when I define an elite team, I usually mean sort of like the top 3 or 4 who really can win the event and are at the level where they can beat each other and they're really at the top of the game, and you could expect high level performances, top 4, top 5, top 6 level performances at each LAN that they go to because they're that good. Cloud9's been around that range. At times they've gone in there, but they've never truly been able to become elite in the sense of like they could have won the massive event, etc. It never really was the case. There were times though where they had like certain teams they could play in a series they could have won to get to the semis or something along those lines, that they could have made a one finals run, maybe ESL1 Cologne. But what's held them back from being elite? Because there's different ways we can break this down. We can break this down in terms of the strategy, in terms of the tactical approach, in terms of the actual roster, the personnel of who they have on their team, in terms of their approach to recruitment and what their options are. And this is some of the things we'll look at, how they use the players within their team. We'll kind of look at this holistically, all the different aspects. So the first problem that Cloud9 have, I'll go at it from a strategical point of view, which is that at their best, when they've had, so far, the different lineups they've had and the different approaches they've had and the different in-game leaders, at their very best, they've been able to be quite good on, decent on CT sides, but they're not good on T sides, or they can be quite good on T sides, like surprisingly good sometimes, but they're not good enough on CT side and just lacking in that area and just losing way too many. And at the moment in the CT meta, you can't win if you're not good on CT side. So we'll get into some of the in-game leadership. I'll talk about that later when I talk about some of the swaps they've had. But that's the problem right now. This team right now, at least the one that went to Face It, the one that went to ESWC, and then also the one that went to DreamHack Winter as well. The biggest problem was they just could not win CT halves. And part of the reason why is because CT half, yes, it's about setups and it's about good communication and the leader making intuitive calls so you can dynamically rotate around, etc. on certain maps. But it's also down to raw skill. The teams that are really sick on CT side, you think of like Dignitas, well, admittedly not as much now, but historically Dignitas. Obviously you think about LDLC, you think about Fnatic. These teams are monsters in terms of the raw skill that they have on CT side and how they're able to like output it in the game and just dominate the game just from that respect alone. Cloud9 can't do that. They consistently lose these battles. They consistently can't hold sites and force the opponent to make hard choices on where he's going to go here or there. Certain sites just get overrun. Beyond Inferno has been a big problem recently. So when it comes to that point in a tournament, yes, they can get wins over smaller teams. But when it comes to that point in a tournament where they're going to be facing against a Dignitas, an NIP, Virtus Pro, Fnatic, LDLC, all of these teams quite clearly outskill them. Their level in terms of raw skill and CT side play is going to be way above the level of Cloud9. And then you can even throw in other teams that aren't as good as that who are also going to be able to beat them. So like Na'Vi, you can throw in, I'd probably say Hellraisers even at this point in time. Like this, the list's getting pretty bad if you're on the side of the iBuyPower, obviously. What's another problem they have? So that's like a general strategical problem that they have. Another problem they have is when it comes to the map vetoes. They have no home map. Every single elite team in the game has a home map. Think of any team now who's the best in the world and you think of their home map immediately. So you think of Fnatic. You're obviously going to say it's Inferno. They're think on that map. You think of LDLC, also Inferno. Funnily enough, that's their own problem with their Fnatic. They think their Inferno's better than Fnatic's. Hasn't been so far. Think of any of these teams, you've got a home map that comes to mind. If you go over to Cloud9, so Virtus Pro, Mirage famously, you go over to the side of Cloud9 now, what is their home map? Okay, used to, in the past, like 6 months or more back, used to be Dust 2. Dust 2 used to be the map they could get wins over. They were able to get a win on NIP and the first map. EMS won Katowice in March. This used to be a solid map for them. They could get wins on it. They could potentially upset teams by using that as their home map. Because the key to having a home map and to being elite is the reason it has to be your home map is because you just know, right, well, when that comes up in the series, if I can get onto that map, then I know I've got to win there. So I'm already halfway to winning the series. Now I just have to figure out another map that I'm maybe not the best on, but I'm not that bad on, and they're willing to play, and I can win there, and I can win the series as well. They don't have a home map. So it used to be Dust 2. Now they seem to think, from talking to them and seeing how they do the map vetoes, they seem to think Inferno is their home map. They seem to think they're amazing on Inferno. That is an illusion. And I've noticed this from going right back, but it's really become very prominent in my mind that this is a key problem they have, thinking that Inferno is so good for them. They've lost. I chucked up the stats for this. They'd lost their last 4 Infernos offline, and of their last 7 played offline, they've lost 6 of the 7, and the only win was against Planet Key. So every time they play a really good team on that map, they're going to lose. So like Virtus Pro, LDLC, they're Hellraisers, they're just losing. And part of it's because they're not good enough on CT side. This is the problem. So now let's look at actually some of the... Well, let me think. Okay, so here's the problem. They're not that good on CT side, and that's a raw skill aspect. So in terms of raw skill, you have to look at the actual roster. But what I'll talk about first is, let's go to the T side first, because I can cover that quicker. So what makes them good on T side, basically? Well, when they're at their best on T side, seems to be when they had Semphis calling. Previously, before that, historically, they've had Sean Gares calling. When they have Sean Gares calling, they tend to be a little bit better on the CT side, but not overwhelmingly, but they tend to be a little bit worse on the T side. And part of the reason why is he has more of the default style of strats. And yeah, there's a little bit of a Pronax style in there where you're trying to read the opponent a little bit and you're trying to anthem-strat them a bit. But in general, it's the traditional style of leadership. And that just doesn't make them that good on T side, partly because they don't have that much raw skill, which then leads into why do they do the Semphis style sometimes? Why have they gone to that, like, break in case of emergency, pull out the Semphis style? Because the Semphis style is super scrimmy. It's just trying to do weird things that can be deceptive, and you do it as a one-off that the opponent won't know and he hasn't seen before, or it's just going to shock them and surprise them, or you're going to do something that's counterintuitive, like the opponent would never think I'd do this because it doesn't make sense, but as a result, I get a little edge on them. The Semphis style like that, the reason that works, first of all, it only works as much in the short term because it is this scrimmy style. That doesn't tend to win you tournaments in general without at least a really good skill level or a really good base. But also it can make up for skill disparity because since you're catching people off and you're getting extra positioning on people and you're getting in a weird angle or weird timing or weird flash smoke Molotov, it allows you to make up for some of that lack of raw skill. Whereas on the executes, you do tend to need good skill in certain parts of the execute. You need a guy who can always hit that shot and you know exactly what this guy's going to do. And Cloud9 don't have that. So their problem is they keep alternating between the two, the Semphis and the Sean Guest style, because ultimately as a team, they're not getting to that elite level. So they're thinking one or the other is the worst. This is part of their problem, the leadership issue. And how do they solve that? They can't really. At the moment, they take turns to go between the two and they just try whatever they can do to make work. So part of this issue is, one of the options is you'd have to potentially think about another leader. So let's look at some of their players and ask what the problem is on a personnel aspect. So we'll start at the top, the best players. Within their team, they don't really have a star. Like I talked about the NA star, there isn't really one that's that level in NA. But they have 2 good players who at the moment have to carry their team. Hiko and Shroud. Hiko particularly, in my opinion, he's like the best NA player. It's not even really that debatable at the moment. I do think Skadoodle is much more skilled and could be the best NA player, but for me, Hiko is the best NA player because he's so polished, he's refined, you know exactly what his game is, what the range of his game, what he's going to do within that. Aside from DreamHack Winter, which he had a bad tournament at, in general, I've almost never seen him have a bad tournament overall. He's very reliable, you know exactly the kills he's going to get, he's going to be in this position, he's going to hold it for this long, and he's going to communicate this way, he's going to win this sort of a 1v1, he's going to get 2 kills here, he's going to get 1 entry kill here, he's going to die to that guy, because it's like, you know the realm of Hiko's game is very reliable. So he's the main guy, and he's going to put up the 20 frags or whatever, and you can rely on that. Then in came Shroud, and he was the revelation, and he was playing awesome, and his aim looked good, and he was having good game impact. The last 2 tournaments or so, that started to ease off a bit, and actually that started to fall apart a little bit, and now he's sort of just becoming like a half good player in the team, like sometimes good, sometimes just no game impact at all, and you wonder, is he into it, is he motivated, does he know what he's doing here? It's hard to kind of tell there, but if he's playing it as a top level, the 2 of them together, yeah, they can make Cloud9 look good for a map and a half. But 2 guys like that aren't going to carry the whole team. They're not Get Right and Forest back in the day in NIP. They're not like Crims and JW now and Fnatic. They can't match up against the elite stars of the other teams, and then the other teams have better other players and better foundation and a better T side and better CT side and a whole map and everything going for them, and proper leadership that's consistent, and everyone knows the role. Cloud9 lacks all these things. And the problem with this is, because Shroud can't be a superstar in the same sense we need him to be, it means that too much weight gets put on Hiko. Yeah, jokes aside. But I mean, he has to carry too much of the burden, too much of the water is like put under his back. And even if they were both on the same par, on the same level, Shroud and Hiko, it'd still be too much for the 2 of them to carry past those elite teams I'm mentioning here that have all those qualities. So this is definitely why they can't make up the fragging and the raw firepower. Now, here's the problem. If you have two players who could play at star level, then you might only need a third to be a half star, or maybe he can sometimes join them as a star, or maybe if Shroud can only be a half star, we can have another half star. We can make up that kind of disparity in this sense. So who would that be? Well, it's pretty obvious, isn't it? It's going to be Nothing. So let's skip that for a second. Why would we need him to do that? Talk about Nothing after this. The bottom end of the skill level is going to be Semphis and Sean Gares. Now, Semphis is the kind of guy who can be deceptive. He can get quite a lot of frags, but he does it in the same style as his leadership. It's like a scrimmy style, just like weird things, and he has a weird angle here, and he has a unique positioning to get a shot off here, and as a result, he can make it work. Kind of a little bit cerebral, but also a little bit kind of intuitive feel in the moment. So he can get kills, but he can't consistently be a big fragger. So the problem is, if he's not the in-game leader, now you're probably getting into some sort of problem territory, because we haven't got much overall firepower in this team to go up against an LDLC or a Virtus Pro. If we make him the in-game leader, okay, no problem. He's good enough to be the in-game leader and do some frags and do this. That's fine. That's the problem with Sean Gares and Semphis. You have to decide between the two of them. In my opinion, you can probably only have one, unless you get stars at the other positions and fill it out there, and then they can just be doing their own thing down here just as a support unit. Think like the rhythm aspect of a band. But if they're being called upon to have firepower, I don't think you can have both. So, okay, that's the Semphis side. Now, Sean Gares. Sean Gares has to probably be the most overrated AWPer in all of CSGO. He's decent. Like, he can use it in a utility fashion just to get a certain shot here or to hold one angle and just get some information. But if you've ever seen him go up against the teams who have really good AWPers and they take angles on him or they take shots over and over on him, they just rip this guy's a new asshole. Like, there's nothing he can do. Because it's just his skill level isn't that great with it. He's using it in terms of using his brain, yeah, but he's not just skill-wise going to be able to match up with the AWP in that sense. So in my opinion, it has to be one or the other. Now that I've done the bottom two and the top two, who's the connector? Who's the guy who, if he was better, could make a difference up here and could allow the bottom two to not have such a problem and could help support the top three and could actually make it a legit team? Well, it's obviously Nothing, isn't it? And this is the whole problem. If I was to say this, the problem with Nothing is asking what is Nothing's role and how can it be effective? You might think to yourself, okay, yeah, go ahead, answer that. No, that's what Cloud9 have been trying to figure out for the past 2 or so years in CSGO. What is Nothing's role and how can it be effective? Oh, they've tried giving Nothing different roles here, there, the other, there. Sometimes it seems like he does it for a week and it works, or he does something just different out of nowhere that wasn't planned, or he does something and it starts to work, then it goes badly, and then consistency issues are always there. Same sort of story that's been around for a few years with Nothing, unfortunately. Then how can it be effective? That's the problem. Even once you give him the role and have something to do and maybe even agrees to do it, can he actually effectively do it like the other players in these best teams in the world can do their role over and over? Flusher can do his role over and over. Olaf M can do his role. Smiths can do his role. He's not able to be effective in that respect. I think that's part of the reason why he wants to bounce around different roles and do different things, because he himself he gets sick of something not working, and so he hopes that the new thing will work, and maybe it does work for a little while. It works in NA and it works in practice and it works in scrim and it worked in this one game, and this is half the problem. Nothing's ever been able to have a real... I've always felt like of all the players that get hyped for having good skill, and I think people go too far with him in this point in CSGO, you shouldn't think of him as that sort of player. You should think of him as an okay player. If you think of him as a player with a lot of skill, because you watch his stream or you see him have that occasional good game, he might have the worst game impact of any player who's put into that category in terms of online against international competition. The game impact just isn't there at all. And so that's part of the problem. You look at the personnel there, and we've got issues all across the board there. Even at Hiko, the most reliable one, well, he isn't like the full true star even. We'd really, in an ideal world, Hiko would be my second or my third best player, and he'd be like either linchpin as the third, like, wow, what consistency, he sets the baseline and what we can do here, or he'd be like my second, and then it would allow some other star guy to like like a Skadoodle type guy to just take it up, knock it out the park sometimes, not be as good other times, but just up there, and we'd really be getting a lot of firepower and a lot of work done, but we can't do that here. So ask yourself this, how could they improve? Well, one of the problems with their team is they've really got locked into this mindset of like the social aspect, like, we have to enjoy playing together. We have to enjoy spending time together. We have to enjoy our teammates and like them as people and think that they're cool and like get on the same page. And the problem with that is in NA, there are so few players who fit their mentality. So all the players I can think of who I'd add to their team, they can't add for exactly that reason. They want the social aspect. So let's think of some names. The one that jumps out of the page to me is Skadoodle. I think the guy's a really sick AWPer, and I think with the right support structure, which Cloud9 probably could give him, he could be really good. He could take their team to the next level, and they'd have a consistent AWPer, and then they could pick a map that they use him on and make that their home map. The reason why they can't get someone like Skadoodle, first of all, aside from the fact that he's off in the mentality of thinking that IBAR Power is going to be good and that's the right sort of team, to me is because since they're so into that social aspect, and since they're used to having like a skill disparity against those top teams and trying to make up for it with communication and with like reading the opponent and trying to get a little edge tactically and using your brain, that's not his style. He's not very good at communication overall. He's not the kind of guy who's going to communicate in that way. He's also not going to communicate on a social level to the same degree that they are. So I could see them immediately not even thinking of that as a possibility. And also, I don't think he'd join them at this point, because if you're him, why would you join Cloud9? Especially because they're doing terribly the last few events. Aside from maybe money or something, that's about the only reason I can think of to do it. So I don't think they can get Skadoodle for that social reason. Likewise, listen, you want an in-game leader, you want firepower, you want somebody who does well at international events. Okay, I've got all three for you. It's called Dazed. Well, that's not going to happen. Semphis and Dazed will not play together. They are like diametrically opposed. They're like on a collision course in terms of like attitude every time it comes down to it. Like those, because of their history in Quantic, if you know anything about it, watch the Hiko interview that I did, Reflections with Hiko, if you want to know the backstory on it. It seems like those two will just never play together. So you're unfortunately never going to get Dazed into this Cloud9 team. In my opinion, again, that's another player. If you take the ego and you take the personality out of it, you take the social impact that he might have on certain players with, maybe he's a bit grinding in terms of his personality and whatnot. Take all that out of the equation, and he would, player-wise, be a really nice addition. Could be very good in that team, give you a good lead, could free up a lot of the other positions. In theory, in an ideal world where they didn't bring the ego into it, who knows, Semphis and Chongas could work around with him, and then they'd have a proper support structure where they could really do full executes, and I could see great ways for this to work. Another name, Anger. They had him in the team, remember? Anger's the guy who, admittedly, has choked on LAN a few times internationally, but at least in the NA lands, skill-wise, he was right up there. He had really nice skill. Now, he does seem a bit... I can get that one from the social point of view. He does seem a bit off in a weird way. Like, I'm not really sure what sort of team he'd fit with. Like, it's hard to know. His motivation level seems very suspect to me. Like, is he really that into it? He's really that driven to win and all? I don't know that he is, actually. His skill level's good, but I think that plays a part in why he's choking and why he's having these issues. And plus, he's just not really that relevant to the scene at the moment. So, yeah, all those names are basically off limit as a result. And so how do they improve? They can't. They just keep swapping players to different positions. They keep swapping in-game leader. They keep swapping the map that they say they're good on this week. They try something weird now. Then they try something default. And then they say, well, we won on this before. And this is the problem they're in. At the moment, they're stuck. And they're in a rut. And they're actually the worst rut of their careers right now. And they just can't get to that elite level. And I think I've kind of addressed pretty much why they're